Hello, Star Wars fans, and welcome back to Battle Station Radio. I'm your host, Kate Ellsworth. This week, we are joined by another guest, my brother-in-law and fellow Star Wars fanatic, Brigham Nicoll. Brigham, it's good to have you on the show.
Dude, it's great to be back. It's been a long while. I can't even remember the last episode we did.
It was the one where it was you and Thomas and Matt Olson all together.
Oh man, I
was
seem
like
to remember
4 years ago.
I remember, like, I forget what we were talking about, but I think we were getting emotional about it. Shows the unhealthy level of love we have for Star Wars.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the Ahsoka series again. That's pretty much the main thing happening in Star Wars right now. And episode 4, which was amazing. So as always, I'll give a spoiler reminder. If you guys have not seen Ahsoka, go right now to Disney Plus, go watch it, and then come back and keep listening to our episode. So there's your chance. All right, so we're going to talk about episode 4, which was Dave Filoni's masterpiece. It had a bunch of awesome stuff. So we're going to talk about that. It was pretty awesome. We have lots of thoughts.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, first of all, like, episodes 1 and 2, they were good. Episode 3 was good as well. They were all good, a little bit slow, but for anyone who just kind of ducked out after 1 or 2 because it wasn't exciting enough, like, totally worth it for episode 4. It really it brought it all together, just action-packed, a lot of lore, powerful stuff, just amazing. So don't miss it. Catch up and watch episode 4.
Yeah, definitely. It takes a little bit to build up in these newer Star Wars TV shows, but once they get going, they're pretty good. So there's a lot of things to talk about in this episode, a lot of events that happen. The first thing that pretty much happens is Ahsoka and Sabine are on their ship. They decide to go and investigate the ground base of the enemy on the planet Cetos, which is where the Eye of Sion is being built. And Sabine and Ahsoka go out, and Morgan tells Baylan to send his 2 cronies, Marok and Shin, his apprentice, and they go out and they fight Ahsoka and Sabine in the forest. So, Brig, I'll let you start with your thoughts on that.
Yeah, man. How about Hu Yang showing some fighting skills? Wasn't that amazing? Like, he's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
he was totally going at that droid.
He has more skills now because the last time we saw Hu Yang, the pirates invaded the ship with the younglings, and he was kind of helpless. And so it looks like he's been doing some training in the gym.
Yeah, so fun with him coming back and going at those droids and being the mechanic and just being solid, just kind of
cool.
giving like just sage advice.
Yeah.
Like when Ahsoka and Sabine run off, remember that? And he said something like, remember, like, you guys always do better when you're together.
Yep.
And I love that.
Awesome.
He's just been throwing all this wise stuff at them. It's so cool.
And he's not afraid to tell them how it is.
Yeah.
Especially telling Sabine that she just sucks as a Jedi.
Right. Well, he's all logic, right? He's a droid. Yep. but he's wise at the same time and knows like every Jedi. It's so cool.
Yep.
I love having him back. But that's where the action really starts, right? We get in there and we get to see Sabine and Ahsoka working together finally, and they actually do a really good job at it. They're kind of bouncing off each other and take out the droids. So that's really rewarding to see them fighting together because we know they've got a history of it. We just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, we haven't seen it in action.
Good seeing them coming back together. Sabine in her armor, looking awesome in that armor, right? So fun awesome seeing that. Yeah.
And then they do sort of, they come upon Marok and Shin, and they kind of each pick their opponent. And Shin eyes Sabine like, "I'm going to get you this time." She's like, "I'm not going to let you escape this time." So I guess we'll focus on. I guess the fight we see finished first is Ahsoka versus Marok. And in a shocking turn of events that surprises no one, she defeats the Inquisitor, and then something interesting happens.
What a bummer, right? We didn't get to see Sam Witwer.
I know.
with him coming in, anyone who doesn't know Sam Witwer, not like I know him personally or anything, but he's the character who plays Galen Merrick in the Force Unleashed video games, which is not canon, but is just phenomenal. And uh, and so he was the actor who played that. He's the actor who voiced the brother, who we'll talk about later from the Clone Wars. He's the voice of Darth Maul. And am I missing anything else? I feel like he shows
He
up in a few
voices
other
he
places.
voices Darth Sidious in the final season of Clone Wars.
Oh, does he really?
Yeah, he's
But man,
everywhere.
he's so cool, and he's such a big Star Wars fan. Remember when we saw him
Yep.
at Star Wars Celebration? Like, I love watching him because he just feels like one of us, but
Yep.
way cooler and way more famous.
Yep. And so Sabine, she kind of does that. It sort of reminded me of the fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Maul. Their last little fight where
Mm-hmm.
they fight, and then he like steps past him, and it's sort of like those like samurai movies where they fight real quick, and then one of them steps away, and like it's really slow, where the other one is like, "Oh no, I got stabbed," and they fall down. So
Yeah,
right,
it
we
was
see him
totally
kind
like
of
Obi-Wan.
freeze in midair, and then he, very much like Savage Opress in Clone Wars, he kind of just evaporates. It looks like all this green mist just explodes out of his helmet, which to me says he was either a creation of Morgan Elsbeth, the Night Sister, or she just somehow revived one of the old Inquisitors and had her working for him. But either way, it
Yeah,
was just a trick of the Night Sisters. And I've been saying this whole time, right? There's a 50-50 shot that he could just be a faceless nobody. And we don't even get to see his face. So, right, all that speculation on all the YouTube videos speculating about whether he's Starkiller or not, and she gets him in like 5 hits, and then he just
yeah.
explodes in the green mist.
But it is good to establish Ahsoka for being as powerful as she is. Like
Mm-hmm.
really, these other anyone else should really not stand a chance against Ahsoka. The
Yeah,
level of experience that she has, but
and to me
it's
that.
really interesting.
Uh-huh.
I was gonna say at the very beginning when Balin, uh, Lady Morgan says, "I sense a hint of fear in your voice," when he sends off Shin and Marok to fight them, and he says experience. So again, kind of hints at like what does Balin know? What was his connection with maybe
Uh-huh.
Ahsoka, with maybe
Yeah.
Anakin? Like how does he know? What does he mean experience? Is it Jedi
Mm-hmm.
in general, or are there specific things going on?
Yeah, I'm interested to learn more about his character. And I feel like the
Yeah.
ease with which she dispatches Marok sort of is a dichotomy for the duel later in the episode, which we'll get to. So she
Hmm.
sort of defeats Marok, and then her and Sabine split up, which we know is a big no-no, according to Huang and every episode of Star Wars: The Clone Wars ever. Um, and she leaves Sabine in the forest to fight Shin, and it's a fairly one-sided duel at first, and Shin kind of does one force push, and off comes Sabine's helmet, and both of her guns fly out of her hand, and then she. It was interesting. Brig, did you notice um, when Sabine sort of puts her hand up to try and force push, that Shin kind of
Hmm.
twists her head in anticipation, and then that little gleam in her eye when she realizes that Sabine has zero power in the Force.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that part. That's so powerful because even though, according to Hu Yang, she is not impressive with the Force, she's still a Mandalorian, and that really counts for something. And so
Uh-huh.
having that combination, Hu Yang probably doesn't, take that into calculation, her ability with the Force, but you take that and combine it with being a Mando, which she's a really good one too, right? I mean, she was
Uh-huh.
able to fight with the dark saber. I mean, you go
Yeah.
back in time, you watch Rebels, yeah, and just how powerful Sabine is, really. But I love it's always been interesting to me how, you get like a stormtrooper shooting at a Jedi or a Sith, or just a regular soldier, and they're so easily deflected. but there's something about being a better warrior that makes you able to shoot at a Jedi and have some effect with it, you know,
Hmm.
like something about Sabine, and particularly a lot of the Mandalorians have this effect, right? Where they can shoot at a Jedi or a
Shoot
Force
really fast, yeah.
user and get it through, or
Yeah,
you
you're
know,
right.
make the Force user run away. So I don't know what
Yeah.
that is, you know. In video games, it makes sense, you know, they have better attack skills, but in real life, it works somehow.
And so, right, she puts her hand up to Shin, and Shin's kind of like, oh, gloating, like I got you. And then Sabine, it looks like she shoots some kind of projectile slash flash grenade out of her gauntlet, and it sort of
Yeah,
it hits. I think it hits Shin's lightsaber, and she drops it, and then they're in a bit of a standoff. And I'm
yeah.
trying to remember. I don't really know what happens after that in the episode.
Smoke bombs. Smoke bombs happen.
There we
Shin
go.
throws some smoke bombs and then runs away, little Batman style.
Yep.
But yeah, those Mandalorians, they always have something up or on their sleeve to get out of a pinch like that. So that was really cool.
Yep. So we see Ahsoka and Sabine both deal with their foes in their own way. And going back to Ahsoka running off to find the ground base, and she comes across Balin. And even the duel is cool, but the conversation they have before the duel is also very interesting.
Yeah. What a great build up too. You know, I know a lot of people are unhappy with kind of the slowness of episodes. I heard a lot of complaints with Andor that it's too slow, but
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I'm glad we have all this time to just have this standoff where they walk around each other holding their lightsabers, and it's way more fun that way. I love the buildup of it. I love the setting too. You know, I know a lot of people speculated in the trailer when they looked at um, kind of all the stars and the map, right? Because they
Uh-huh.
walk into this temple area with the map around them,
Yep.
which is being powered by witchcraft, apparently. That's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, that's really
Um,
interesting.
yeah, so not necessarily um, like the map. I don't know. It seems like it was almost designed by witchcraft and not necessarily the Force.
Yeah, it's
It was
interesting.
really
I hope
neat.
they reveal more about like where the map came from. I mean, I don't think they're going to, but it would be nice to know more.
Yeah, yeah, but fantastic. I mean, a lot of the conversation was just really cool. But what stood out to me was Balin's connection with Anakin. He hints at it multiple times, right? He's saying, um, you know, your master, kind of your, what does he say at the beginning? He goes, Ahsoka, like, Anakin spoke very highly of you. And
Uh-huh.
then, you know, Snips comes back with, oh, really? He never mentioned you. So
Yeah,
perfect Ahsoka line right there.
that was a very Ahsoka line. I thought so.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's so many hints that Balin knew Anakin and Vader as well.
Yeah. And
And
if some of
so,
our listeners aren't really acquainted with, deep canon in Star Wars, like almost nobody in the Empire knew about Darth Vader. And if they did, they were the first one to be hunted down and slaughtered
yeah,
by Darth Vader, right? So
yep,
it's
yep,
like, how did he know that? That's very interesting that he could have deduced that or figured that out.
yeah. And you know, this is jumping ahead a little bit, but just talking about Balin and Anakin slash Vader. Um, near the end of the fight, he says to Shin, he says, "Unlike her former master, I will keep my word." So again, jumping ahead, but like I was just thinking, like, what did he mean by that? Did he mean his word to the,
Yeah,
you
that's
know, his
interesting.
commitment to the Jedi, or his commitment to the Emperor, right? Because I guess Anakin kind of broke his word to the Jedi and then broke his word to the Emperor
Uh-huh.
in the end. But yeah, I think that's a big question. Like, how many people actually knew about Vader turning back? I don't think many. I'm thinking of
Hmm.
that Leia book. Did you read that Leia book? Uh, Bloodline.
It
Did you read
yeah,
Bloodline?
and the one where her chances at being the chancellor are totally demolished by
Yeah,
her
yeah,
lineage coming out.
exactly. And just that book was just so powerful. Just the takeaway from that book was Luke walked away from Vader at the end, believing that um, he had been redeemed
Hmm.
and that he was good again. And Leia was like, "Yeah, I get that, but the last time I saw Vader, I was in a jail cell with a torture droid coming at me with a shot, and Vader sat there and watched me be
Yeah,
tortured, type thing."
yeah,
So
interesting. Their experiences are very different.
yeah, so yeah, that was a tangent.
I thought it
So
was interesting. It's sort of their in their conversation before the duel. It's sort of their two worldviews clashing, right? Because Balin, you can tell,
hmm
is just very disillusioned. I think with the Jedi, I wouldn't be surprised if he had left the Jedi as well before Order 66. He just seems very. He doesn't have any hope in a brighter future, right?
yeah,
And he thinks that the only way to change that around is to bring back somebody who is really good at waging war and can sort of tear down the New Republic and maybe, try to start again. They're very disagreeable on how the galaxy should be improved, right? He's gonna get improvement through destroying what was there before, even though they did that 25 years prior with the
yeah,
Republic into the Empire. And so right, they're at odds, and so when they finally pull their lightsabers out, he's like, "Well, this fight was inevitable. Like we were never going to resolve this with words." And one of my favorite parts is how long they let them circle each other. I love the differentiation in terms of the lightsaber sounds. Right, hers
oh man, so
was very
good.
hummy, and his had a little bit of that Kylo Ren, kind of
hmm
brokenness to the sound. And
Yeah,
I love when they like zoom down on his lightsaber, and you could hear the sound, and then the camera moves past and goes to Ahsoka, and you hear the sound of her lightsabers, and then they go at it.
yeah. A big plug for like the Star Wars Galaxy Edge lightsaber, right? When you put that white crystal in, that it was the exact sound that you heard in the show.
Oh,
So
nice.
that was kind of fun. Yeah,
That's very
yeah.
cool.
Ahsoka's lightsaber has such a good sound to it.
Yep.
Um, One of my favorite moments from the battle, just again, I wish I knew all the different like fighting styles, but they seem to switch back and forth between different fighting styles throughout. So I thought that
Uh-huh.
was cool. But there's one scene, it's worth going back and looking, but Balin kind of has her up against a rock and Ahsoka's holding him off, and then she like puts a leg back on one of the rocks and
Yeah,
is
she's
like
bracing herself
holding.
on one of the rocks.
Yeah, it's so cool. And the power, right? Like Balin, I don't know the name of the fighting stance, but it's very Vader-like. It's more power, less agility and less
Yeah, he's
speed.
not like
But
Yoda flipping over end, and like Attack the Clones.
hmm
He's just a juggernaut. He just hits as hard as he can each time.
exactly. And that's ultimately how he finishes off Ahsoka, taking her off the cliff with just big overpowers her and pushes her off
Yep.
the edge.
And I
But
think it's
I
interesting that right, they show Ahsoka earlier in the episode and she dispatches a Morok pretty easily, right? And then we get to Balin, who is her first serious opponent since fighting Darth Vader on Malachor, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting that he poses such a challenge because there's not many people left in the galaxy that trained in dueling at the Jedi Temple, right? Like that's a whole
Yeah,
another skill. Like some of the duels in the sequel trilogy are cool, but they don't have the same awesome choreography, right? Because neither
yeah.
Rey or Kylo Ren trained all their lives to be dueling masters, right? And so this is two Jedi that all Ahsoka pretty much finished her training. Was going to become a Jedi Knight before she left the Order. But right, this is her first time in a long time fighting an opponent who has just as much training as she does.
Yeah. I like at the end of the battle, I really like the theme of the fear of loss, right? Which is a recurring theme in Star Wars, and Yoda comments on it that it's a path to the dark side. Um, but you see Ahsoka when she's fighting Balin, and then Shin walks up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she assumes that Sabine has been killed.
Yep.
And then you see a little bit of that anger come out from Ahsoka, which we know
Yep.
she's prone to. We saw her multiple times in Clone Wars kind of reach that point of letting the anger take over, learning from her master and doing that, right?
Uh-huh.
But there were times she kind of grabs Shin and like smashes her against a rock,
Yeah,
which it's
she force pushes her and she smacks her head pretty hard.
yeah, which not a not a bad strategy at all, but it just didn't feel very Jedi like, you know.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
then yeah, and then we get her. She goes over the edge, right? Right after
Yep.
Sabine walks up.
Yeah.
Sabine walks up, picks up the map, and holds the gun to it. And I think we all knew at the beginning of the episode when Ahsoka said, "Sabine, can I count on you?" And
Oh
Sabine
yeah.
said,
Sabine's not
like,
gonna destroy that map.
yeah, yeah.
Ezra is so
Everyone
important
knew.
to her that yeah. And I
There's
think
no way
yeah.
she would do it.
The last thing I'll say in terms of the fight with Balin and Ahsoka is right, we've seen I think she's so aloof from Sabine because right, Anakin, her master, the one who probably she loved more than anything in the galaxy, right? And she thought she lost him at first for a decade or two, and then she finds out he's turned into this horrible monster. And right, I
Hmm.
think getting close to anyone is sort of traumatizing for her. And then feeling like, oh man, I finally had an apprentice and we were finally getting along and now she's been killed. Like, you know, that fear of loss, which prompts her to, right? There's no way she's getting out of that lightsaber lock with Balin, right? Even force
Yeah,
pushing Shin is not going to get her out of that. So that was definitely motivated by anger, I think.
yeah, yeah. And you really see the Jedi lose their power when they get scared or when they get angry, you know.
That's true, yeah.
And then we move over to that same theme with Sabine, right? She's got the gun, her blaster held up to the map, and then Balin seduces her, right? With the
Yeah.
same promises that Dooku used and the Emperor used.
Yeah, it's
Promise of power,
interesting.
promise of whatever you
Uh-huh.
want.
I saw a video on that today, and it was like, first, it was just like Palpatine does, right? First, you discredit the authority figure, by telling her all these things about Ahsoka and her master, you know, and then, you appeal to the emotions, right, of protecting the ones you love, like Ezra, and then by the time that happens, it's a master class in manipulation from Balin,
Yeah,
and of course, she
yeah,
ends up giving him over the map. One thing I thought was interesting is that when he destroys the map, right, as they've taken Sabine prisoner, he has to hold his lightsaber on that map for like 5 seconds. Sabine shooting that would have done nothing.
totally. Right.
Yeah.
I know
So
it
there wasn't even
wouldn't
a
have made
chance
a
to destroy
difference.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you wonder if Balin knew that and didn't really care, wasn't worried at all when
Yeah, because
Sabine
he
picked
really
it up.
didn't seem worried at all.
Yeah. Um, cool. So after the fight, right, Balin goes over, puts the map back, and the uh, the ring is back online, right?
Yep. So
The
they finished
Eye
their
of Sion
calculations. Yep.
back online. And then we get Hera, right? Hera just
Yeah.
being the ultimate rebel, right? And kind of cool. She joins forces with another ultimate rebel who we've met in Mandalorian. What's his name? Carson Teva, right?
Tiva. Yeah.
Yeah.
That guy's awesome.
Car- he comes in and of course if there's a chance to do something right and rebel, like he's in, we saw that multiple times in Mandalorian, so I love that. He's a good character.
Yeah, he's awesome. I can't wait to see what they decide to do after this episode, right? So we see Hera pop up, and she's basically telling the Rebel Alliance, like, I dare you to fire me, right? I'm going to go help my friends. And so she takes
Yeah,
Jason, her son Jason, and the Ghost, which we get to see the live action Ghost, which is awesome. If you've watched Star Wars Rebels, that means a lot. And then she goes off with the battalion a squadron of X-wings, and they go but they're not very successful in their mission to stop the Eye of Sion. And the Eye of
Not
Sion
at
launching
all.
was pretty cool.
Yeah. Now, I don't have much to comment on it, but it's just really interesting how there's something about hyperspace and needing a larger ring. Like in my mind, hyperspace is hyperspace, right? Doesn't matter how
Uh-huh.
big the ring is. If you're there, you're there.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, what exactly that larger ring means, um, I'm not sure. But uh, but yeah,
something in
really
the physics of
interesting.
designing hyperdrive engines, and maybe there's a bit of Night Sister magic at work there too.
Yeah, yeah.
But it sounds
But
like
it,
the bigger the hyperdrive ring, the farther you'll go, right?
yeah, yeah. So super cool. Sadly, we lose two of the X-wings in that, right?
Oh, darn it.
Um,
Oh, yeah, you're right. We did.
yeah, kind of sad. I mean, we didn't see them blow up, and so maybe they made it down to the planet alive.
Uh-huh.
But looks like they
I'm
were
not.
probably
I'm
gone.
not optimistic. Yeah. So it looks
No,
like
no.
the wake of the ship, because it goes right over them. They slip through the hyperdrive ring, right? It looks like it's some type of ion blast in the wake of the hyperdrive, and they kind of just
Yeah.
lose their engines for a minute. And yeah, like you said, sadly, two of the X-wings don't make it, and then we see a little interesting callback to Jason Sandula maybe being force sensitive when he goes,
Hmm.
"Mom, I've got a bad feeling about this," and she kind of looks at
Yeah.
him like, "Yeah, you think?"
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool. I love seeing it's so fun seeing Jason this early on. I know we were all looking forward to the moment we saw him because that's one of the final scenes in Rebels, right? The scene
Yep.
Hera with their little goofy looking kid in front,
Yep.
half human, half Twi'lek. And but yeah, he's been cool so far. I'd love to see more of him in the future, uh, developing with the Force. See where that
Yeah.
goes.
And then the last thing we'll talk about before we move on to the really awesome part was just a little short segment on how I think the rebels are going to have to end up using the Purgles, the space whales, to go and follow the Eye of Sion. Because obviously,
Mm,
Sabine's there alone with the enemy, and they need to find a way to follow. And we know that Purgles can travel through hyperspace, and we know that they can kind of latch on to ships and ferry them along as well. And we know that somehow, presumably, that ancient civilization that made that Stonehenge on Cetos probably used Purgles as well. So I think that's the
mm.
most likely scenario is that they find a way to hitch a ride, you know, put a saddle on one of these Purgles.
Yeah, how someone can be exposed in hyperspace and not just be disintegrated. I'm not sure how that works, but apparently you can do that because that's how Thrawn and Ezra left. They were in a ship, they were exposed pretty much,
The
right?
windows were
Kind of the
open. Yep.
front. Yeah, the windows were open and somehow they made it through. So we'll see
Yep.
what happens with that. I think one other just possibility, I agree, it's probably the Purgles, but in the Thrawn book series, kind of the newer series, obviously, the one that's canon, there's a really cool scene where Anakin and Thrawn, and this is going back in time. Or, no, sorry, it's Vader. I believe it's Vader at this time, and Thrawn are together. Sorry, I forget. Probably misquoting it, but Anakin, in some phase of his life, are together, and Anakin learns about how the Chiss, who is this, this blue race who lives out in unknown regions, how they get
Uh-huh.
around, and they get around by identifying Force users in their amongst their people, and those Force users can navigate through hyperspace using the Force. And whatever this means, they call it skywalking, which is kind of cool. But that ability that you don't need a navigacomputer to get through hyperspace, you can
Wow,
do it
interesting.
with the Force. So I doubt that information, you know, got passed on to Ahsoka or Sabine or
Hmm.
anyone else. But Ezra may adopt that or have learned about it out there. So it'll be
Yeah, you're right.
interesting to see if that ever comes back because that's a big deal,
And then,
using the
right,
Force through hyperspace.
a big possibility is that there's the Purgles, but also Ahsoka using the Force is involved. when they make the
Mm-hmm.
trek out following the Eye of Sion. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see how they catch up and what the other galaxy looks like, because that's going to be really awesome.
Yeah. It'll be really cool. And then on to
And
the
now,
finale.
yep, on to the finale of the episode. We have the appearance again of the world between worlds, which is a very lore-heavy concept that's only been explored once before in Star Wars Rebels, and we are excited to talk about it. So we see sort of the camera pans over the shoreline, and it's a really cool like cinematic transition, and we see Ahsoka as she's laying down on her back, and she's in the world between worlds.
And she wakes up and hears a voice. Now, the world between worlds is not new to Ahsoka, right? Um, Before I say what voice she heard, let's do kind of a recap of Rebels, the episode in the world between worlds.
Yep.
Ezra is kind of called to this place. This is in the final 2 or 3 episodes of Rebels, which,
Yep.
plug for Rebels, if you haven't seen it, it's so worth it. And yeah, it's a little slow and childish at the very beginning, but the entire series, all 4 seasons of it, is totally worth watching just
Yep.
so that you can enjoy the
Exactly.
last chunk of episodes. It's
Yes.
powerful. It's just amazing. But when Ezra was called to the world between worlds, he walked over to a portal, and if you remember, he was watching Ahsoka and Vader fight, which
Yep. So
was the
he's
season finale of episode 2
So
of
we're going
Rebels.
like, and by that we can see that the world between worlds is sort of a gateway through time and space.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly. And Ezra peeks in, and he's watching himself. If you remember the episode, if you haven't seen it,
Yep, I
one of
do.
the best Star Wars episodes ever. But Ahsoka and Vader and Anakin and Ezra are fighting, and Ahsoka knows that Ezra is going to get destroyed if he's in there, so he force pushes him out as the
Out of
temple
the
walls are
falling door.
closing.
Yep.
And leaving Ahsoka and Vader there to fight. And so now we get Ezra looking through the portal, watching Ahsoka and Vader fight. And Ahsoka does this final move where she's going to destroy the floor and make Vader fall. And her lightsabers are both in the ground. And Vader rears back to swing and finish her. But Ezra reaches through the portal and pulls her into the world between worlds. So
Which
Ahsoka's
was crazy
been
to
there
watch
before.
in the episode. It was like, whoa, you can do that?
Yeah. Really, really weird stuff. Unlike anything we've had in Star Wars before.
Yep.
Time travel and time manipulation.
Messing with time.
That's
Yep.
not. Yeah, that's not really the Star Wars universe. But here
So
it is.
I saw an interesting video
Go
that
ahead.
said, right, nobody else has faced 3 Sith Lords in a day. And here's the thing: on Malachor, she fights Maul, and she I think she beats him pretty much, or she starts beating him, and then Kanan finishes the job, and then she goes and duels, the second most powerful being in the galaxy, Darth Vader, and then by luck of the draw, Ezra in the world between worlds pulls her out, and then Ezra and Ahsoka are left to deal with Darth Sidious, who is right on the precipice of getting access to the world between worlds. All he has to do, presumably, we assume, is to pull one of them through, and then he'll get access. And think about the damage a Sith Lord could do with the ability to manipulate time and space, right? And so in that episode, he's shooting his Force lightning to try and grab them, and they split up. They go to a fork in the road. They split up. Ezra jumps out in his current time out of the portal, right? And then Ahsoka steps back onto Malachor with her time. So it doesn't look like you can, cheat the laws of time. But she goes in, and then, that explains how in the last scene of season 2 of Rebels, she's pictured going back into the temple. And so now we know she got pulled out of the fight with Vader, and then she was stepped back in probably a few minutes later, and then went under. And that was her last experience with the world between worlds. And now we'll get to who was it talking to her?
It was Anakin. Anakin's in there and looking nice and digitally touched up,
Yep.
looking very like angelic. He's one with the Force,
He's light side
and
Anakin, yeah.
yeah, and what a cool thing, right? He's got like Episode 3 clothes on, right? Kind of his black like tunic
Yep.
looking
Uh-huh.
thing, and he's looking happy, right? He's looking at peace.
Yeah, he looks like the
It's
Anakin
a
we
beautiful scene.
know and love in Clone Wars, right?
Yeah,
And then
and what a
small wrinkle at the end of the episode, um, a few chords of the Imperial March play at the end of the episode. And there's been some speculation online that this Anakin in the World Between Worlds is holding onto Vader's lightsaber as opposed to the Skywalker lightsaber. And before we get
hmm,
into that, I'll just give my thoughts really quick. I don't think the first time we see Anakin and Ahsoka talking to each other, chronologically for the first time in 25 years, I don't think it's going to be a trick. I don't think it's the son or the father of Mortis, or we'll get into that in a minute. But I think it is Anakin. Maybe there's a slight twist to it, but I don't think Dave Filoni's going to have this reunion happen and then have it be a deception, right, from something evil.
yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. So here are my thoughts on the world between worlds, right? In Rebels, Sidious was trying to get into it, right? And we learned from one of the Emperor's like priests, Minister Haydn. He says, "He who controls it, meaning the world between worlds, controls the universe." And we saw how Ezra could manipulate, you know, the past and the future.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so obviously the emperor wants to get into that. And who's in the world between worlds? We don't know exactly, but we get several hints. When Ezra first walks in, we hear Yoda, we hear Obi-Wan, we hear Rey,
A lot
we
of different
hear
things from
Kylo
across
Ren.
time, yeah.
We hear all these different things, all these different people. We hear Qui-Gon in there. So there's no evidence that Sith are in there. Kanan,
Or uh-huh.
I'm trying to remember if we hear his voice, but if he had the ability to kind of become the wolf Dune or Doom and then bring
Mm-hmm.
Ezra in, my guess is he's got some kind of access to there as
Yes,
well.
exactly.
So I don't think Sith can get into the world between worlds because the phrase we always use is become one with the Force. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what it means to go into this place. The Sith, just by their ideology, they don't become one with the Force. They control the Force,
Mm-hmm.
where the Jedi are more uh, going along with the will of the Force. So
Yep.
I don't think Sith are in there. So I don't think Anakin is bad.
Uh-huh. One thing I thought could be really cool and really interesting is if Anakin in this next episode oscillates between Anakin and Vader. Like,
Mm,
same body, but like for 2 minutes at a time, he is freaking out on Ahsoka about how she left him and how the Jedi are evil and stuff. Like, right? I don't think the Vader persona would have come with Anakin as he becomes one with the Force, but I think it'd be interesting to see them kind of oscillate and switch back and forth. Don't think it's gonna happen, but that was a cool theory I had.
yeah, that would be really cool. I can't wait for the next episode. I mean, you end with Anakin popping up, which significant, right? We've heard Anakin in The Rise of Skywalker, but other than that, this is the first time we see a post Vader Anakin,
Yep.
right? Other than Return of the Jedi, obviously, in the
And
final
somebody actually is
cutscene.
gonna have a conversation with him. Yeah.
Yeah. So to get that insight into how he's doing and what's going on with him is just going to be an amazing thing.
Yeah. So yeah, really this episode and talking about this episode has reminded me of how much I love Star Wars and sort of the deeper lore side of the Force and everything that George
Yeah.
Lucas set up and that Dave Filoni is continuing. I think it's just really awesome.
Yeah. I'm just so excited that Dave Filoni is doing this. He's just amazing. I love what he brings to Star Wars. I love
Yep.
how he reveres George Lucas and,
Oh yeah.
holds true to it. But he's also adding some really cool things. And
Yeah.
I mean, going back to Clone Wars, right? The father, the brother, the sister. Again, this too much to talk about in this episode, but so much of Rebels at the end is this mural of these characters from Clone Wars. So this is
Yep.
really where it like tied together Clone Wars. One of the coolest arcs in all of Clone Wars
Yeah,
was
definitely one of the
the
coolest.
Mortis arc. Ties
And I
together
think those
that with
are
Rebels,
the
with
father, son, and daughter, I think, are the Mortis gods or something.
yeah. And so hopefully we get to learn more about this, and kind of fitting because so much of shows right now and movies are like multiversal stuff. And I hope Star Wars doesn't go too deep into that, but I feel
Uh-huh.
like kind of the world between worlds is kind of that, making
Yeah.
making a story even more complex and more possibilities. So I like a
Yeah.
little bit of that, not too much. Goes too
Hmm.
far, I think, in other universes, but it could be a really cool thing.
Yeah, so right, we filled up about 45 minutes talking about this awesome Ahsoka episode 4. I hope you guys at home are following along with Ahsoka. I hope you're getting as excited as we are. Um, Rosario Dawson, who plays Ahsoka in this new TV series, has said that episode 5, this upcoming episode, is her favorite episode of the bunch. And coming from someone like her who's so connected to Star Wars and connected to her character, I think that's saying a lot. So we are very, very excited to see what we have in store for us on Tuesday.
So cool. So cool. Gabe, great being here, and yeah, it really gets that Star Wars fire going
Yep.
when you just
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks
sit
so much for
back and
coming on the
talk
show,
about it.
Greg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, anytime.
All right. You Battle Station Radio listeners out there, may the Force be with you always.